Chapter 23. How can the phone be broken? Karen asked herself, staring hard at it. I just heard that frightening voice. He talks to me on that phone. I didn't imagine it. I didn't, Karen told herself. With a cry of despair, she turned and bolted from the office. She could hear Mrs. Ferguson's alarmed voice calling after her, but Karen ignored it and kept running, out into the crowded hall, filled with kids returning from lunch, getting ready for fifth period class. Karen turned first left, then right, unsure of where she wanted to go, and stumbled right into Adam. Hey, he cried out, startled, and dropped his brown leather briefcase on his foot. Adam? His surprised face blurred in front of her. The floor appeared to rise up beneath her. Karen backed up against the wall, breathing hard, and waited for her head to clear. Adam, what are you doing here? I go to school here, remember? He shot back, staring at her hard through his black-framed glasses. What's your problem, Karen? You look terrible. I don't feel well, she told him, rubbing her throbbing temples with both hands. I feel really sick, I think. I have my mom's car, Adam said, leaning toward her, trying to make himself heard over the slamming lockers and shouting voices. Want me to drive you home? Yeah, Karen replied impulsively. Thanks, Adam. I really do feel sick. She glanced up at him, trying to make his face come into focus, but it remained a fuzzy blur. Won't you get into trouble? He shook his head. I'll drive you home and be back in 5 minutes. I only have study hall next period anyway. Karen made her way unsteadily down the hall to her locker, where she collected her coat and books. Then she hurried out to the student parking lot. A few seconds later, she was sitting next to Adam in his mother's old Honda Civic. It was a wet, gray day. Most of the snow had melted, but a few large patches dotted the ground. The tires spun on a small square of ice as Adam pulled out of the student parking lot. He was tapping the wheel with both hands, nervously rapping out a rapid rhythm. Feeling any better? He asked, eyes straight ahead on the road. A little, Karen replied, pressing her hot forehead against the cool window. I have to call Dr. Rudman. Adam thought about her answer for a while before replying. What's the problem? Phone calls, Karen said under her breath. I've been getting these horrible, threatening calls. For real. Adam didn't react. He turned onto Fairfield. I just got a call, in the office. This frightening voice. I don't know who it could be. He said he could see me. He said he was going to kill me. Adam glanced over at her, then quickly returned his eyes to the windshield. But then Mrs. Ferguson said the phone was out of order, that it wasn't working, Karen continued with a sigh. Adam hummed under his breath. Wow. You don't believe me, do you? Karen accused. Well, no one believes me, Karen said angrily. You think I'm crazy, don't you, Adam? No, of course not, he replied. I'm not making up these calls, Karen told him. I'm not. They're real. Someone is really trying to scare me. I made up the other calls. I admit that. It was a really stupid thing to do. But these calls are real, Adam. On a busted phone, Adam exclaimed. Karen sank back in her seat. Adam thinks I'm crazy. He thinks I'm hallucinating or hearing things or something. I'm not. She realized she was desperately trying to convince herself. Well, as soon as I get home, I'm going to call Dr. Rudman, she said, more to herself than to Adam. Good idea, Adam muttered. Why are we stopping? Karen cried, suddenly frightened. She stared hard at her cousin. Because you're home, he replied, gesturing out the window. Oh, Karen could feel her cheeks growing red. Sorry, I really am a basket case today. She pushed open the car door. Thanks for the lift, Adam. I really appreciate it. Hope you're okay, Adam said. You don't believe me, do you? Karen blurted out, suddenly feeling very sorry for herself. You think I'm making up these calls? Adam shrugged his slender shoulders. I don't know, Karen. And then his eyes narrowed behind his glasses as he added, Sometimes I hear voices, too. Adam? Sometimes I hear them late at night, he continued, his expression solemn. Adam, please, Karen pleaded. I'd better get inside, okay? Thanks again. She climbed out and slammed the door shut behind her. He's totally weird, she thought as she ran around to the back door. Totally weird. Karen let herself into the house. The kitchen smelled of stale eggs and bacon. The breakfast dishes were still in the sink. Anybody home? She called. Of course not. Chris was at school. Her mother was at work. She let her backpack fall to the floor, crossed the room to the refrigerator, and pulled out a can of Coke. It felt strange being home in the middle of the day, walking through the silent, empty house. She felt like an intruder. She felt as if she didn't belong here. Crazy thoughts. I'd better call Dr. Rudman, she thought unhappily. As she started toward the kitchen phone on the wall, it rang. The sound burst through the heavy silence. Startled, Karen nearly dropped the Coke can. A second rang. She stood frozen in the center of the room, staring in horror at the red wall phone. Was it the frightening caller? Was he really watching her? Had he followed her home? Should she answer it? Chapter 24. After the third ring, Karen grabbed the receiver and pressed it to her ear. Hello? Her voice came out tight and frightened. Karen, you went home? Ethan, she exclaimed, sighing with relief. Ethan, I'm sorry, I waited for you, he said, by the lunchroom. What happened? Karen could hear loud voices in the background. She could hear lockers slamming, kids laughing. She knew Ethan was using the payphone outside the library. I got another call, she stammered into the phone. It was really frightening, Ethan. The same hoarse voice. He said he was going to kill me. That's terrible, Ethan murmured without any feeling. You don't believe me, do you? Karen accused, her voice trembling. It was a real call, Ethan, a real threat. Do you believe me? Do you? He didn't reply. The kids' voices in the background seemed to grow louder. She heard a long bell ring. I've got to go, Ethan told her. That's the bell. I was worried about you, so... But do you believe me? Karen demanded, not intending to sound so desperate. I'll call you later. I've got to run, he said. Call Dr. Rudman, okay? He hung up. Karen remained with the phone pressed to her ear, leaning against the kitchen wall, the steady buzz of the dial tone drilling into her brain. He thinks I'm making it up, she thought bitterly. The next morning, Karen dreaded returning to school. Would the kids be gossiping about her? Would word have gotten around that she had left school in the middle of the day because she was hearing weird voices on broken phones? Her mind whirring with troubled thoughts, Karen was halfway down the driveway when she realized she'd forgotten her coat. I really am losing it, she said out loud, hurrying back to the house. She arrived at school a few minutes before the final bell, and hurried to the office to deliver the absence excuse note her mom had written. The two secretaries were arguing about pencils as Karen stepped up to the long counter. The number 2 pencil is softer than the number 3, Mrs. Ferguson was insisting. They're not numbered for softness, the other secretary insisted. They're numbered for darkness. Mrs. Ferguson? Karen called, holding the folded-up excuse note over the counter. Sorry to interrupt. Mrs. Ferguson made her way to the counter. Good morning, Karen. My absence excuse? Karen muttered, handing her the note. Mrs. Ferguson unfolded the note and glanced at it quickly. Then she raised her eyes to Karen. I owe you an apology, she said, folding up the note again. Huh? For what? For yesterday, Mrs. Ferguson replied. She pointed to the phone at the end of the counter. The phone wasn't out of order. It had been broken for 3 days, but the guy came to fix it yesterday morning and nobody told me. She smiled at Karen. Sorry. That's okay, Karen replied. The bell rang. Karen turned and hurried out the door. So the phone had been working after all. Knowing that fact didn't cheer her up at all. That only meant one thing. The call was real. The threat was real. Someone who knows me is trying to scare me, Karen realized. Someone wants to scare me, or kill me. But who? The halls were empty. She was late. Her footsteps echoed in the long, silent hall. A classroom door slammed hard, startling her. She turned a corner, heading to her locker to deposit her coat, and someone grabbed her from behind. Chapter 25. Karen cried out, her voice echoing down the long, empty hall. An evil laugh invaded her ears. She spun around. Chris, you creep! Her brother grinned at her, pleased that he had scared her. Chris, what are you doing here? She cried angrily. Thought you might need this, he said, still grinning. He held up her backpack. Oh no, Karen moaned. I left without my coat this morning. Did I forget that too? She grabs the backpack away from him. Getting a teensy bit absent-minded, are we? He teased. Thanks for bringing it, Karen said. Then she added, You didn't have to scare me to death. Why not? He replied, laughing. He gave her a quick wave, then headed toward the exit. Karen stood watching him leave, shaking her head. Why does he enjoy scaring me so much? He really never misses an opportunity. A door slammed, stirring her from her thoughts. She dropped her coat in her locker, and, lugging the heavy backpack on one shoulder, ran down the hall to homeroom. Karen slipped her hands around Ethan's neck and pulled his face close. They kissed, a long, sweet kiss. She moved her hands out to his long black hair and stroked his head as she kissed him. When the kiss ended, she sighed breathlessly and lowered her forehead to his chest. They sat in silence for a long while. I've never felt so close to him, Karen thought happily. She snuggled against him, wondering what he was thinking. They were at one end of the den couch. A single lamp cast an orange glow over the room. Wish we had a fireplace, Karen thought dreamily. She raised her face for another kiss, but Ethan climbed quickly to his feet. "Where are you going?" she asked, surprised. "Jake's," Ethan muttered. "I told him I'd come over." He glanced across the room to the desk clock. "Jake's? How come you're spending so much time with Jake these days?" Karen demanded, unable to keep the hurt from her voice. "He's my friend, remember?" Ethan replied sharply. Karen jumped up and threw her arms around Ethan's waist. She hugged him, pressing her face against his long, soft hair. "Don't go," she whispered. Ethan turned to face her, gently removing her arms from around him. "I promise, Jake. Really. I really don't feel like being here alone tonight," Karen said shakily. "Sorry," he replied, lowering his eyes. "Can I call you at Jake's?" she asked. He hesitated. "Well, we might go out." "Ethan, do you believe me about the phone calls?" The words tumbled from her mouth. She hadn't planned to talk about the calls, but the fact that Ethan doubted her had been troubling her mind the entire evening. Yeah, he replied, tugging at the tiny silver ring in his earlobe. "I do." Karen wasn't sure she believed him. "Do you have any idea who might be making the calls?" she asked. He started toward the front door. "Some creep, I guess," he replied. "Some creep?" She followed him across the living room. Halfway to the door, he turned back to her. "What makes you think it's someone we know?" he demanded. "It's probably a total stranger, Karen. You know, someone who just punched your number at random." "No," she insisted, crossing her arms over the front of her purple sweater. "No, no way. Whoever it is knows my name, Ethan. They didn't dial it at random. They reached me at school, remember? They asked for me at school. They know me, Ethan." "Yeah, I guess you're right," he said softly. He picked up his jacket from the stairway. "Call me if you need me," he told her. She came forward to give him a goodnight kiss, but he hurried out the door. Upstairs in her room, Karen tried to study, but the words in the government text became a dark blur on the page. "I feel so alone," Karen thought, bent over the desk, supporting her chin on her fists. "I really need a friend." "Maybe it's time I made up with Micah," she told herself. Actually, Dr. Rudman had suggested it. She and Micah had been close friends all year. They had so much in common. They had always been able to talk about their problems together. "Micah," Karen said her name out loud. Micah, Micah, such a pretty name. She glanced at the desk clock. Almost 10. Not too late to call. "I'll phone her and apologize," Karen decided. But before she could reach for the phone, it rang. She reached across the desk and picked it up before the first ring had ended. "Hello?" "This is your imagination, Karen." The hoarse, whispered voice in her ear. "I'm inside your brain. Can you feel me in there?" "No!" Karen cried angrily. "Leave me alone! Leave me alone! Do you hear me?" "But I'm inside your brain, Karen," the frightening voice rasped. "I can't leave you alone. I'm going to kill you. Maybe tonight." Karen started to cry out again, but she muffled herself when she heard a sound behind the rasping voice. One sound. Karen listened to the sound, heard it again clearly, and knew who the caller was. Chapter 26. Her heart pounding, Karen grabbed her coat and hurried out to the car. It was a clear, cold night. A pale half-moon shimmered in a dark purple sky. Small patches of snow dotted the dark ground. The blue Corolla started easily, but the windshield was frosted over with a thin layer of ice. Karen impatiently tried brushing it away with the wipers, but it didn't work. With a loud groan, she climbed out of the car and scraped the windshield with a plastic scraper. "I hate winter," she cried aloud. Tossing the scraper into the back seat, she climbed back into the car, switched on the headlights, and headed away. "I can't believe this," she thought. "I really can't believe this." But she knew she was right. She knew who had been calling her. She knew who had been threatening her, frightening her. Now she had to find out why. Her foot pressed down all the way on the gas pedal. Karen drove through a stop sign without even noticing. "I can't believe that someone so close to me would do that," she cried aloud. She suddenly realized she was gripping the wheel so tightly her hands ached. With a furious cry, she made a sharp turn onto Jefferson. Most of the houses were already dark, she saw, even though it was only 10:15. The houses, the front yards, the winter bare trees rolled past the window in a dark blur. A few moments later, From the top of the hill where she had spied on him, Ethan's low, ranch-style house came into view. Feeling her anger rise in her chest, Karen lowered her foot on the brake to slow the car. Chapter 27. Karen stared out at Ethan's house, stretching darkly over the flat lawn. The car slowed nearly to a halt. She realized her legs were trembling. Her entire body was shaking with anger, with hurt. How could somebody so close to me want to frighten me like that? It was a question she knew she had to answer. The light was on in Ethan's bedroom in the far corner of the house. Is he home from Jake's already? Karen wondered. Is he in there right now? Ethan, Ethan, Ethan. The name repeated in her mind. But the horrifying question pushed Ethan's name aside. How could somebody so close to me want to frighten me like that? Taking a deep breath and holding it, Karen drove the car past Ethan's house, past the house next to it, past the empty lot beside that. Then she made a sharp right turn into the long driveway across the street. The wide yard was still covered by a thin layer of snow. A light over the porch cast pale white light over the gray shingled front of the house. The bare trees shifted in a slight wind. What were they whispering to her? Karen wondered. Were they telling her to go back? Karen closed the door quietly behind her and then raced up to the front door. What am I doing here? She asked herself, running on trembling legs. What am I going to do? What am I going to say? She leaned against the glass storm door, pressing both hands against the glass, struggling to catch her breath. The front door, she saw, was open a crack. A line of bright yellow light seeped through the opening. She grabbed the handle of the storm door and pulled the door open. She listened. Silence. Behind her on the street, a car rumbled past. Karen pushed open the wooden front door just wide enough to slip inside. Now what? What do I say? What do I do? The living room was brightly lit. A fire crackled in the fireplace. All of the lamps were on. The chrome and white leather couches appeared to glow in the bright light. An enormous framed movie poster of Clark Gable and Vivien Leigh from Gone with the Wind hung on the wall opposite the window. Karen had always loved that poster, loved the strength of Clark Gable as he carried Vivien Leigh up the tall staircase. But now it filled her with revulsion. She hated the poster, hated the modern white couches and chairs, hated the room, the whole house. Why am I here? What will I say? What will I do? Karen gasped and froze against the wall as Micah came into view. Micah had her back to Karen. She was dressed in loose-fitting gray sweats. She sat on a square white leather ottoman in front of the window. One hand held a cordless phone to her ear. The other hand toyed with strands of her thick blonde hair. Her back pressed against the wall, her knees shaking so hard she could barely stand. Karen stared across the brightly lit room at her old friend. What should I say to her? What should I do? Micah, Karen screamed before she even realized it. Micah, I know it's you. Micah gasped and dropped the phone to the plush white carpet. She jumped up unsteadily from the ottoman, her green eyes wide with shock. How did you get in? Micah cried. Karen stepped toward her. I know it was you, she repeated in a tight, angry voice she didn't recognize. Why, Micah? Why did you do that to me? Huh? How do you know it was me? Micah snapped back, her shocked expression turning to anger. How do you know, Karen? Oh, Micah, Karen sobbed. I heard the chimes. It was 10 o'clock. I heard the stupid chimes behind your whispering voice. Micah's mouth dropped open, but no sound came out. Oops, Micah shrugged. Her expression remained hard, her eyes trained warily on Karen. Why? Karen demanded, taking a few steps closer. Tell me why. Micah backed toward the fire, her hands tense at her sides. You're so dumb, Karen, she murmured scornfully. No name-calling, Karen said sharply. Just explain, Micah. Just explain why. For Ethan, of course, Micah replied with a sneer. She tossed her hair behind her shoulder with one hand. Huh? Ethan? Micah let out a scornful laugh. You mean you didn't know about Ethan and me? You didn't know that Ethan planned to break up with you so that he and I... But I thought it was Wendy, Karen interrupted. Micah shook her head. He was never interested in Wendy, she said softly. She picked up the iron poker from its stand and turned to jab at the fire. Why do you think I was spending so much time with Jake, Karen? So that I could see Ethan. Ethan and I met at Jake's. You couldn't possibly think I was interested in Jake, could you? I didn't know, Karen replied weakly. But you ruined it. You ruined everything, Micah said with emotion, poking harder at the fire. Ruined it? With those stupid phone calls you made up, Micah said bitterly. her green eyes glowing angrily in the darting orange firelight. But, Micah, Karen started. Shut up, Micah screamed. You ruined everything. When you started the routine with the phone calls, Ethan suddenly felt so sorry for you, so guilty, he couldn't bring himself to break up with you in your hour of need. I know, Karen said. But again, Micah cut her off. Shut up, I said. Shut up, Karen. Micah poked the fire furiously, sending out waves of sparkling cinders. When you started inventing those stupid phone calls, I never saw Ethan. He was spending all his time with you. Every night, every weekend. He felt so sorry for you. Micah twisted her features in disgust. And all the while, you were a total fraud, Karen. A total fraud. You made up the calls to hold on to Ethan. You ruined everything for me. Everything. But, Micah, you were my friend, Karen protested breathlessly. You were supposed to be my friend. I tried to warn you, Micah told her. I came to your house. I tried to warn you that Ethan wasn't worth it. She shook her head bitterly. But of course you wouldn't listen to me. And then you started making those awful calls? Karen cried. You're crazy anyway, Micah said coldly. I figured a few real calls would send you over the edge. I wanted Ethan to see how crazy you were. I wanted him to realize that he belongs with me, not you. No, Karen cried, her entire body shuddering. No, no, no. Her anger took over. She couldn't hold it back any longer. Karen opened her mouth in a loud cry of fury. Then, before she even realized what she was doing, she was plunging across the room, rushing at Micah, ready to hit her, to tear at her, to hurt her. Micah's eyes went wide. She turned from the fire and raised the hot poker. Karen tried to stop, but her anger was like a tidal wave, out of control, pushing her, carrying her forward. No, please, Karen cried. But it was too late. Ethan is mine now, Micah screamed, and she shoved the burning hot poker through Karen's heart. Chapter 28. Karen dropped to her knees as the pain burned through her chest. It took her a short while to realize that she hadn't been stabbed with the poker. A hot cinder had leapt from the fire and burned through her sweater. Micah stood over her with the black iron poker poised in one hand. In the bright firelight, her hair glowed as if aflame. Give up, Karen, she muttered, narrowing her eyes in hatred. No, Karen shrieked. Her anger swept her forward again. She drove blindly with her arms outstretched and tackled Micah around the knees. Micah cried out as the poker sailed out of her hand and bounced across the carpet. Karen pulled her down, and the two girls began wrestling furiously on the floor, in front of the fire. Uttering breathless cries, they tugged and punched at each other. This is crazy, Karen realized as she struggled. But she couldn't stop herself. She cried out as Micah slipped out from under her, and, panting loudly, climbed to her feet. Karen reached to tackle her again, but Micah dodged away, and then Karen saw Micah pick up a heavy white lamp from an end table. Karen struggled to roll out of the way, but Micah was too quick. With an anguished groan, Micah raised the lamp above her, preparing to swing it down on Karen's head. Please, Karen managed to cry out, raising her hands and shutting her eyes. She waited for the lamp to crash down on her, waited for the pain. When it didn't come, Karen opened her eyes to see Ethan pulling the lamp from Micah's hands. Micah released the lamp without a struggle and took a step back. Ethan! Karen cried joyfully. I'm so glad you're here, Micah declared, throwing herself into Ethan's arms. She pointed down at Karen. She was going to kill me. No, Karen protested, struggling to her feet. She's crazy, Micah told Ethan, still pointing at Karen with one hand and holding on to Ethan with the other. Karen told me she hears voices, Ethan. She said her voices ordered her to kill me. She's so crazy, Ethan. Karen came here to kill me because of her voices. We have to help her. We have to get her to a hospital right away. Okay, Ethan said softly. Chapter 29. Okay, Micah, Ethan repeated softly. You can stop lying to me. Huh? Micah's mouth dropped open in surprise. Ethan pushed her away from him and helped Karen to her feet. Then he slipped his arm around Karen's waist, holding her tight. She's crazy, Micah insisted weakly. She hears voices, Ethan. Enough, Ethan said softly. I heard everything, Micah. He pointed to the cordless phone on the carpet. I was on the phone with you, remember? You didn't turn it off when Karen came in. I heard your whole conversation. That's why I came running over. Micah sighed. Her shoulders slumped. The light seemed to fade from her green eyes. But, Ethan, You and I, Ethan shook his head. Micah, didn't it ever occur to you that I stayed with Karen through all this because I care about her? Sure, you've been after me to break up with her, and I was tempted for a while, but I came to my senses. I realized how much Karen means to me. Micah let out an anguished sob of defeat. Then she turned away, her features twisted in sadness and dismay. The room became silent except for the crackling of the fire. Karen leaned her head against Ethan's shoulder. She felt his arm tighten around her waist. Am I hearing voices now? She asked. Or did you really say that? I'm hearing voices telling us to leave, he replied softly. Holding her close, he led her to the door. This has been a Nightfall Audiobooks production of Call Waiting by R.L. Stine, a point horror novel, Book 15. Hi, this is Chris with Nightfall Audiobooks, and thank you very much for joining me for my production of Call Waiting by R.L. Stine from the Point Horror series. I know why I read this book only once when I was younger, because it's not very good. This was very, very disappointing. It has a really, really cool cover, too. The font looks great, it's nice and threatening, it's huge, it's right in front. The story sucks. The whole thing is two jealous girls fighting over the same guy. Why does everybody want to go out with Ethan? So Karen is distrusting of practically everybody, and she makes up some story about Ethan wanting to go out with Wendy when he never had any interest in her at all. And then she invents those phone calls to convince him to stay with her. And then Micah gets in on the action and starts doing real phone calls. And as soon as we hit that chapter where Karen heard the noise in the background during the threatening call, I knew it was Micah, because Micah's dad had those annoying chimes installed that he liked but she didn't. So Karen heard the chime during the phone call and put two and two together, rushes over to Micah's house. Remember, Micah and Ethan are on the same street, so yeah, it's easy for him to just run out of his door, run down the street in the cold, and run into Micah's house and break up the fight. The book ended really abruptly, too. What happens after this? So Ethan and Karen go away happily ever after? Do they call the police? Do they get Micah in trouble? Is she reported? What's going on? A lot of R.L. Stine books kind of end this way. Just end. I wish it had a better ending. I kind of wanted a more concrete ending. Do I recommend this book? No. Do I recommend this book in any capacity? No. It's not scary. It's boring. It's long. It's drawn out. This book could have been a short story or a novella or 100 pages or less. This could have been a high school author's book that they wrote because they had to fulfill an assignment. It's done a very good use of R.L. Stine's favorite tropes, which was the phone, but did you catch that thing at the end, too, where Micah was trying to drive Karen insane? What is this, the rich girl? Because that same plot point was used in The Rich Girl. Yes, I know it's R.L. Stine. Yes, I know he can rip himself off. But that's a little weird. You don't usually see high school students, much less adults, engage in psychological terrorism to the point where they try to drive somebody out of their mind. And over a guy? Wow. So I suppose Micah needs some serious help. But, wow. Ethan can't be worth it. Nobody can be worth it. Anyway, if you want to read some books that deal with the telephone as an instrument to tell the story, then The Wrong Number Duology is fantastic. So is Ski Weekend and Truth or Dare. If you want a book that deals with psychological warfare and terrorism like this, where characters try to drive somebody else insane, then read The Rich Girl. That was wonderfully done, too. In fact, that's one of my favorite Fear Street novels that I had never read before, and someone requested, and it was wonderful. No one requested this book. I read this because I felt like reading it. So what should I do next? I don't know. Write me an email, nightfallaudiobooks@gmail.com. I'm also on YouTube at Nightfall Audiobooks. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. I also have a Patreon page, patreon.com/nightfallaudiobooks. So tell your friends, tell your mom, tell whoever it is that you think would like to listen to me tell them tales from R.L. Stine. Thank you very much for listening, and I will see you next time.